Hello, I'm Russell Brooks, and this is episode number 0739 of the Stuph File Program with Peter Anthony Holder, and it comes to you right now.
The following program is brought to you in living color.
Now, it's time for an eclectic mix of interviews and some of the oddest news stories you'll ever hear. It's the Stuph File Program with Peter Anthony Holder.
Hey there, hi there, ho there! Peter Anthony Holder here with you, and yes, this is indeed another edition of the Stuph File Program, number 0739. And coming up on this edition of the Stuph File Program, Christopher Bouzy is a tech entrepreneur who is the creator of the new social media platform called Spoutible. Christopher is someone who used to work with Twitter, and with Spoutible, it is his goal to launch a better, friendlier site.
There are a couple of missions and goals with Spoutible. And the first one is providing a safe environment for folks where we are eliminating or trying to mitigate mis and disinformation and the harassment and stuff that we unfortunately see on other platforms. But then the other part of this was to do it better. I've been frustrated for a very long time with Twitter and its functionality and lack of certain features. And I could just never wrap my head around why it takes them so long to get things done.
Horror writer Philip Fracassi is the author of Boys in the Valley. It's the story of a turn of the 20th century orphanage. What made him use this true life locale for a horror story?
I had to pitch this studio on some horror movie ideas, and so I was doing research and I came across this article about this orphanage and at the turn of the 20th century where half of the boys mysteriously vanished. So it's a true story, it's nonfiction, but then I kind of took that premise and I thought it was a really interesting idea of like what happened to those boys. And I really loved the idea of writing something that was isolated, and I just loved the idea of kind of isolating these little kids, throwing in some demon possession and letting it kind of take off from there.
Marc Hartzman from WeirdHistorian.com is back with a brand new book. This one is called We Are Not Alone, The Extraordinary History of UFOs and Aliens Invading Our Hopes, Fears, and Fantasies.
I write the book not with a particular agenda, so I'm not trying to convince you that, yes, they're all aliens are all here, or no, they're not here. Of course, the book is called We Are Not Alone, which implies certainly something is going on. But I don't try to sway you one way or the other as much as just present evidence to you and let the reader decide, really, based on the evidence I'm providing, the stories I'm providing, what they want to walk away with, which at the end of the day, I hope is really an open mind about the subject, which is what I have. I find myself to be very open-minded about it. There are stories that I find very convincing that something is going on.
And there's lots and lots of Stuph File news and, of course, an idiot of the day. The guest slater, the person who told you this was show number 0739, was thriller novel writer Russell Brooks, author of Jam Run. And you can actually hear him on the Stuph File program on show number 0709. Check it out. Thank you very much, Russell, for doing the guest slate on this edition of the Stuph File program, a show that is listener-supported, fan-funded radio that depends on you for our success. Join us at patreon.com to help make this show an even bigger and better radio experience. Well, let's get right to the stuff. Fourth graders at the Academy of Innovative Education Charter School in Miami Springs, Florida, got to choose a movie to watch during lunch on October the 2nd. They unknowingly chose Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey, a 2023 horror film about two murderers who prey on university students while wearing Pooh and Piglet costumes. According to one parent, Michelle Diaz, the teacher didn't stop the movie even though the kids were saying, "Hey, stop the movie, we don't want this." She said her twins were traumatized. The school later issued a statement saying they have already met with those students who have expressed concerns.
Oh, bother.
Meanwhile, still with teachers and a follow-up to last week's edition of We Don't Pay Teachers Enough, Stephen Taylor, an educator at the Mill Creek Campus Alternative School in Olathe, Kansas, lost his job over videos he posted to TikTok. In the videos, Taylor, who also does stand-up comedy, said he saved up his big, milky, lactose-intolerant gas and dropped bombs silently, and then I just let it stew. He also claimed that he gives students misinformation when they annoy him. I tell them Abraham Lincoln invented the car, that's why it's named after him. When Taylor was called before the school board, he told members, the reason I'm doing comedy on TikTok is to make money because you only pay me $45,000 a year and I work all the time. Taylor said the students understand his jokes, but he was relieved of his duties nonetheless, and he has no plans to return to teaching. Well, clearly this is a school board without a sense of humor. It's not like he was doing porn. Oh, wait a minute. That was last week's teacher. Go back and listen to it if you missed it. 28-year-old Lenny Rodriguez Cruz topped off a busy night of crime with an assault on a police officer on September the 20th. Cruz was allegedly driving a car with license plates that didn't match in Queens, New York, when an officer tried to pull him over. Cruz instead raced off, driving on a sidewalk and through a park and hitting 4 other vehicles, including a police car, before crashing. His breath smelled of alcohol, and there was a cup with an alcoholic beverage in the car. But it was back at the station where Cruz sealed his fate. He bit off an officer's left ring finger up to the first knuckle.
I'm going to show you how to make fun finger sandwiches.
Well, rule number 1, don't use a real finger. The Queens District Attorney said he could be looking at 25 years in prison. Wow, 25 years. That's a lot of digits for one digested digit. And finally, in this section of Stuff File News, before we get to our first guest here in this edition of the Stuff File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder, Lincoln County, Oklahoma District Judge Tracy Soderstrom, who was sworn in on January the 9th, may already be out of a job. In July, Soderstrom was captured on a court camera scrolling through social media and texting on her phone for minutes at a time during a trial. Soderstrom's text to her bailiff included comments on jurors and prosecutors' appearances and calling a police officer who was testifying pretty and saying, I could look at him all day. She was suspended with pay pending a hearing by the court on the judiciary. The Chief Justice of the Oklahoma Supreme Court recommended her removal, saying, the pattern of conduct demonstrates Soderstrom's gross neglect of duty, gross partiality, and oppression. Well, it looks like she will have enough time on her hands to perhaps try and date that cop.
You are out of order! You're out of order! You're out of order! The whole trial is out of order!
Yeah, perhaps I crossed the line. Anyway, let's get to our first guest here in this edition of the Stuff File program, shall we? Christopher Bouzy is a tech entrepreneur who founded Bot Sentinel, a Twitter analytics service that tracks disinformation, inauthentic behavior, and targeted harassment. Earlier this year, he launched a new social media. It's a platform called Spoutible. Christopher joins us via Zoom from New Jersey to talk about it. Hi, Christopher.
How are you? Thanks for having me here.
Just tickety-boo. Thanks very much for being on the program with us. Full disclosure, I'm on several social media outlets, platforms, and I think Spoutible is one of the best. So I just want to put that out there right now. Now, as I said, you founded Bot Sentinel, which was a Twitter analytics service, and you did that in, I believe, 2018. So it wasn't long ago that you were part of Twitter. I just want to get your thoughts as to how Twitter has changed since you were there.
Well, yeah, the reason why I launched Bot Settle, it came out of the whole, mis and disinformation during the election cycle here in the United States, the 2016 election cycle. And, I realized that there wasn't really anything that was publicly available at the time that was easy to use for the average individual to be able to understand what was happening on Twitter in terms of mis and disinformation. But as time went on, the platform evolved, and we also started monitoring targeted harassments and all that stuff, all the toxic stuff that's happening on Twitter. this must have been approximately October-ish of 2022. There was the whole thing with Elon purchasing Twitter, a lot of fear, swirling around what's going to happen to the platform. Because he was even at that time saying a lot of things that didn't really make a lot of sense in terms of guardrails with harassment, disinformation, and all that stuff. So I decided that we may try to do something about this, and there was a whole bunch of users who were like, "Hey, you should start a platform because you already have experience in this." So me being on Twitter and spending a hell of a lot of time on Twitter, not just for personal stuff but also work-related stuff, it was quite jarring to see how quickly it was starting to devolve, even before deciding, okay, hey, yeah, you know what, we're going to move forward with launching this platform. I was on there and I would tweet something out, I would, instantly get attacked. And just for your listeners to know, like, because of the work that I do, I was always a target for trolls to begin with. I had a Twitter feed that just had a lot of nastiness because, once again, because of the work. But it got increasingly worse, or I should say significantly worse, once Elon took over. And I realized, well, if this is happening to me, what's happening to the other people of color out there, women of color, or just women in general? And and that's how the whole idea of Spoutible came about, was to, provide a platform for folks to quite frankly, to be safe, to, and not have to deal with that.
One of the other things that I've noticed with the platform is that although there's a similarity to Twitter, I get the feeling that having been at Twitter for a while, you had a sense of, well, I know what we can do, but I think we can do it better. And maybe there are some things that Twitter doesn't do that it should adopt. And you've just done that with Spoutible.
And so there were a couple of missions and goals with Spoutible. And the first one, I kind of already talked about that, is providing a safe environment for folks, where we are eliminating, or trying to mitigate, at least, I shouldn't say, because you can't mitigate, mis and disinformation and the harassment and stuff that we unfortunately see on other platforms. But then the other part of this was to do it better. I've been frustrated for a very long time with Twitter and its functionality and lack of certain features. And I could just never wrap my head around why it takes them so long to get things done. And why a lot of the stuff that, to me, when I was using using the platform, was a no-brainer, that they were not, for whatever reason, not trying to do on their platform. So we took the best of Twitter and built on it. We launched in February 1st, and from that point on, I mean, even from before that, but we've been releasing new features every single week for the last 8 months or so. And the goal is not just to provide just similar features to Twitter, but, as you stated, to release features that are better, to improve upon what Twitter has already done.
Has there been any concern, because, as you know, Elon Musk has been very vocal on the people who have left Twitter. Has there been any concern that they would come after you for, say, copyright infringement, or the fact that you work there and you have a social media platform?
I never worked at Twitter, just to be clear. I was never an employee, well, thank goodness, at Twitter, just so you understand. No, the company bought Sentinel. I can't even say we were partnered with them, because we were never really officially partnered with Twitter. There was definitely behind-the-scenes talks, and there was some animosity as well with certain individuals within the company, because we were constantly exposing stuff and working with outlets to make the public aware of what was happening on the platform. And there were some folks at the company who did not like that. And there were some folks who applauded us. But I never worked for Twitter. But that being said, there were conversations around Elon just trying to come after us, and he has. With the company bot Sentinel, look, this is just speculation. I don't know. When we were trending quite a bit in April and also in July, they just, for whatever reason, shut down the bot Sentinel Twitter account. cut off our API access, and then suspended the Spoutible account and never gave us a reason why. Never said, well, these are the rules that you violated, which we didn't violate any rules. We've been on Twitter for forever. So we do think that was, retaliation for Spoutible and what we've been accomplishing with it. But, in terms of a lawsuit, I mean, anyone can sue anyone for anything, whether it's here in the United States or Canada. But I don't think that would be a lawsuit that he would be able to succeed in terms of win in court, because we didn't use Twitter source code, for example, and the layout is a common layout across a lot of different platforms, not just Twitter.
Now, I understand that you were, and I'm doing air quotes, that kid. You were the kid who was coding from the time you were 9 years old, and you started coding on a Mattel Aquarius computer?
Yeah, and I tell people this all the time. I say, look, it's not as impressive as it may sound. My mom, she worked for one of the telecom companies, and she worked with computers, and she didn't have any experience with coding or anything like that, but she was able to see where the future was going, where folks wouldn't have to know how to use these machines. And she purchased me one. It was really more of like a toy than anything else, than a serious computer. But she felt like if she can get me started then, by the time I was older, I would have some knowledge that would help me in the future. And she was right. But it wasn't just that. We lived in a bad neighborhood in Brooklyn, and she wanted to keep me occupied. She knew that by keeping me occupied with different things, different hobbies and stuff like that, that would keep me out of trouble. And once again, she was right. But the Mattel Aquarius was just a dumbed down computer. I mean, it was essentially a toy. But it did. I mean, you could code on it. It was a form of Microsoft Basic. And here on the East Coast, we have a paper called the New York Daily News. And every Sunday, they would actually, at that time, they used to have like little code snippets in the Sunday paper. And one day, because it was collecting dust, I didn't start coding right away. I was just like, what the heck? And they had some snippet of code for that particular computer, and some others that also used the same processor and language and stuff like that. And I did it, and it was just to make a ball bounce around the screen. And I was hooked from that point. I used to go to Radio Shack and get books on and coding and stuff, because unfortunately we didn't, there was really no internet at the time that was publicly accessible where, you can get on and learn all this stuff that you can learn now. But that started me on my path to what I'm doing now.
And look where you are now. So we're just about out of time. I just need to ask, what's up for the future with Spoutible in your eyes? What do you want to accomplish, and where do you see it going?
The whole plan behind Spoutible was to first provide a place for folks to be able to converse and interact with each other without the fear of, once again, being attacked and all the toxicity that comes with it. But, we want to take it beyond that. We feel that we've accomplished the mission of providing that safe space. And we also believe as we scale, we can continue to do so. But it's also about taking, the micro blogging experience and expanding on it. Because Twitter was also struggling, even way before Elon, to innovate, to actually make the microblogging experience, something that's not only profitable and monetizable, but to be able to scale it in a way where you're not just kind of hitting that wall. I can't remember what number it was now because it's been a bit, but they were never able to reach 1 billion users because at some point they kind of just plateaued. So we want to go beyond that. We want to find out, okay, what is it that we can offer our users to make this experience better? Make that microblogging, instant, posts where information is just going at incredible speed, make that more appealing to a broader group of users, or I should say a wider group of individuals.
Well, you seem to be on the right track, and upward and onward, as the saying goes. Congratulations on what you've done so far. I'm curious to see what's going to happen in the future. Christopher, thank you very, very much for taking the time to be on the program with us.
Thank you. No, thank you for inviting me and giving me a few minutes to talk about this. I appreciate it.
Christopher Bouzy, the man behind a really great social media platform called Spoutible. You can go to my website at thestufffile.com, check out the show number for this program, which is show number 0739, and you'll find the link to Spoutible and also the link to my Spoutible account. Join us and follow. You're listening to the Stuph File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder.
There's still more guests, more news, and an idiot of the day coming your way on the Stuph File program. Stay tuned. The Stuph File program is a listener-supported, fan-funded radio show that depends on you for our success. Join us at patreon.com to help make this show an even bigger and better radio experience. Sign up and find out about our rewards program. Being a patron doesn't have to be a long-term commitment. There's absolutely no obligation. You could join today and end whenever you'd like, but the time we have your support would be so greatly appreciated. We'd also love to hear your thoughts about the show and even your ideas for rewards. Join us for the ride. Join us at patreon.com/The Stuph File program. Available on Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and just about every other way you stream audio. This is the Stuph File program with Peter Anthony Holder. It's radio that's everywhere you want to be, and some places you don't.
And still to come on the program, we'll talk to horror author Philip Fracassi. His new book is called Boys in the Valley. And Marc Hartzman from WeirdHistorian.com is here with his book, We Are Not Alone. We also have an Idiot of the Day coming your way, and much more in Stuph File News right here, right now. When sheriff's deputies in Marion County, Florida, were called out to mediate a dispute between 56-year-old James William Jubane and a neighbor, Jubane insisted on telling the deputies how they should conduct their investigation. They apparently didn't do so to his satisfaction. He called 911 to demand their supervisor tell them to follow his instructions. They told Jubane that if he wanted to speak to a supervisor, he needed to call a non-emergency number. He apparently didn't like that advice. He repeatedly called the 911 emergency number, including well after the deputies had left, which caused the dispatcher to warn him that calling 911 without an emergency constitutes a crime. Said Jubane, "You want to charge me with abuse of 911? Go for it. I'm going to keep calling 911 back. You can charge me all you want." Well, not surprisingly, deputies eventually returned and went for it. Jubane was jailed for abuse of the emergency number, and a judge set his bail at $8,000, which Jubane was apparently unable to pay right away, so he remained in jail. You know, when you're in jail, you get one phone call. I wonder who he called. Yeah. Yes Communities, which manages a mobile home park in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, spells their company name Y-E-S exclamation mark. That's why I said yes when I said their name, you see. But they emphatically said no with an exclamation mark in telling residents not to talk to the media about the snake. Apparently, it's been slithering around the trailers for at least 5 months, and residents say management hasn't done anything about it or even warned them that the critter was there. But they knew something was up. Multiple cats had disappeared in that time. Said one resident who understandably wants to remain anonymous, talking about another neighbor, the only reason they finally did something was because a resident snapped a picture of it. The photo, which was published in the media, revealed the yellow albino reticulated python is 13 feet long. A pest control expert was hired to come in and remove it, but says he has to wait until does some repairs. Meanwhile, residents say There are kids in here, and that thing needs to go. I bet the management group at Yes are asking themselves, how many children exactly, and how big are they? Yeah. A family outing to the Fossil Rim Wildlife Center in Glen Rose, Texas, got all awkward when a giraffe lost its footing and crashed into the windshield of Carrie Hill's car. The park allows people to drive through in their own cars and feed the animals. As Hill and her family communed with a giraffe, it stuck its head through her sunroof and smiled for a picture. But then the animal slipped and fell, became panicked, and started flailing its legs. After it recovered and ran off, Hill realized her windshield was shattered. No one was hurt, but they were covered in glass. Hill said when she filed an insurance claim, it was hard for them, as anyone, not to laugh, but they were professional. Well, at least the insurance company didn't think it was a tall tale. And finally, in this section of Stuff File News, before we get to our next guest here in this edition of the Stuff File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder, and speaking of giraffes, when customs officials seized a box of giraffe feces at Minneapolis-St. Paul International Airport on September 29th, they naturally were curious about why the traveler from Iowa was bringing the poop back home from a trip to Kenya. CBP said the traveler had obtained the droppings in Kenya and planned to make a necklace. The passenger also stated in the past she had used moose feces at her home in Iowa. The contents of the box were destroyed. Well, all I'm thinking is this is a woman who is extremely easy to shop for at Christmas. Yeah. Anyway, let's get to our next guest here in this edition of the Stuff File program, shall we? Critically acclaimed horror writer Philip Fracassi is back on the show. We had him on the program earlier this year to talk about his novel called Gothic. Well, he's back with a new one titled Boys in the Valley. He joins us via Skype from California. Hi, Philip.
Hey, Peter. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for being back on the program with us once again. Now, this one is billed as The Exorcist meets Lord of the Flies by way of Midnight Mass. And I know I asked you when I spoke to you about Gothic that, you should write what you know, and you told me Gothic wasn't autobiographical in any way, shape, or form. Please tell me this one isn't also.
No, this is pure fiction. It's actually historical fiction. The whole story is set in 1905 in Pennsylvania at a rural, remote boys' orphanage. So, no, this one is not, thankfully. I was not ever in an orphanage, so I was very fortunate in that way.
What made you go back to this particular story? What was it that interested you in the genre, not the genre rather, but the time period of an event that took place?
Well, I was doing research for, I had to pitch this studio on some horror movie ideas. And so I was doing research and I came across this article about this orphanage and at the turn of the 20th century, where it was this little boys' orphanage in rural Pennsylvania where half of the boys mysteriously vanished. And the orphanage was shut down and the priests who ran the orphanage were sent wherever they were sent, and the rest of the boys were sent to wherever they were sent. And I just came across this little article. It's a true story. It's nonfiction. But then I kind of took that premise and I thought it was a really interesting idea of like what happened to those boys. And so that was kind of the acorn of it. And then I really loved the idea of writing something that was an isolated setting. Some of my favorite movies, The Thing. And I just loved the idea of kind of isolating these little kids, throwing in some demon possession and letting it kind of take off from there. And so that was kind of the root of the idea. And I just liked the idea of doing something that was period, kind of get away from all the modern stuff that people, are familiar with, and create this little story world of horror. And that's why I decided to write the book.
When you write a period story like this, do you have to go back to early turn of the 20th century sensibilities, or do you write it for an audience with 21st century sensibilities?
Yeah, no, it's definitely written as a period piece. There was there's an extensive amount of research that goes into these kind of things. I've written other period. I've written a novel that took place in the 1860s. I've written a novella that took place during the Civil War. So those were extensively researched. This one, because it was an isolated setting and the whole story basically takes place in this orphanage, I really studied dialogue. Dialect. I studied how people spoke. I read a lot of first-person memoirs. And the sensibilities were definitely old school, definitely of that era. So, kids were really mistreated, and it was a very rough living. And that's kind of what I think adds a lot of flavor to the story is, they don't have any of the modern conveniences or sensibilities that we have now. They're sort of stuck in this time period and all that entails.
As I said, we spoke earlier in the year when Gothic came out, and we also spoke about the fact that you are also a screenwriter. And quite often when you talk to novelists, they take a certain amount of time to put a book out. Here you are with 2 books in less than a year. You are obviously very prolific as a writer. Is that the screenwriter in you that teaches you to be that prolific, or that just the way you always have been?
Well, yeah, it was actually 3 novels in a year because I had a novel come out called Child Alone with Strangers in November of 2022. So I've had 3 novels since last November. But you know what it was? It's kind of one of those things. I'm fairly new. I've only been publishing since 2015, and I had been writing for years. Writing all that time since 2015. Since I first got published, I've been writing, and but it's kind of like that dam finally breaking sort of thing, where all of a sudden all these people who are saying no to you are now saying yes to you. So it became a bit of a logjam where I'd sold 2 or 3 novels and very quickly, and they all kind of got scheduled. And then because of COVID, the first novel got pushed back, and so they all kind of logjam together. So the point being is that while I am, I guess, relatively fast writer, I'm hoping that the releases will begin to slow down to once or twice a year now moving forward. But I don't think it's my screenwriting. I think it's just the fact that I just love doing this so much, and I finally am being given a way to get the work out to readers. Like I said, a lot of those no's from publishers are now becoming yeses. So it's very exciting for me. And so I just love, I'm at my desk, 10 hours a day, 7 days a week working. And I just love it. So I think when you do something you love, you just want to kind of do it all the time. So I think that leads to a prolific output.
Well, speaking of prolific output, part of your, for lack of a better term, day job was taken away because of the recent Writers Guild strike. Did that give you more time to write literally your own stuff, write your fiction, write novels or novellas?
I've actually, I don't spend a lot of time writing screenplays these days. I do write them. I was hired to write one, I think, in late 2021, and then another one in 22. So I haven't been writing obviously anything since the writer's strike. But for the most part, I focus on fiction these days. I focused on, I try and get 1 or 2 novels a year and call it half a dozen short stories, maybe a novella or 2, depending. But the writer's strike was difficult in other ways for me because I have a lot of work that has been optioned for film and TV adaptation, and all of that, all those projects were kind of put on hold. So for about 4 months there, whatever it was, I wasn't getting, none of those projects were moving forward. So that was difficult for me. So I'm glad that the writer's strike is over, and I'm just going to keep writing fiction, and then people want to take my stories and make them into movies. That's great.
Well, you had to deal with the pandemic, as you mentioned, and then there's the writer's strike. And are you figuring, from a horror prospect, what could possibly be next?
Yeah, I know. That's for sure. And it's I'm hoping nothing is next. I'm hoping we're good to go for a while. I mean, COVID for me, purely from a professional mode. I don't want to obviously downplay the horrors of COVID, but for me, it was kind of it was nice because I just was able to write uninterrupted for a couple of years, and because there was nothing was happening because of COVID. So I really got a lot of work out during that time. And whereas nowadays I kind of spend half my time sort of dealing with the business of writing and half my time actually writing. And I would love that equation to change so I could spend more of my time writing. But so hopefully nothing comes up and we all keep publishing and writing and everything gets back to normal.
Well,
nice.
Getting back to the boys in the valley, when you're doing the research to write a book like this, do you think about not necessarily the time period that it's in, but also what orphans are like today? I mean, orphanages don't necessarily exist like they used to, but there are still children who, for lack of a better term, are orphans.
Yeah, I didn't really think about that. I was very focused on what an orphanage was like in 1905 and what orphans were like and the cruelties that they were subjected to. I mean, a lot of these kids were sold to factories at very young ages, and the disciplinary methods were obviously much harsher and than they are currently. But I will say this: I think that this, you mentioned earlier, the sensibilities, and I do think that I try to infuse into the characters a lot of the emotions that I think even a modern day orphan child would feel. That sense of loss, that sense of abandonment, that sense of loneliness, and finding family in other places. These kids are all they have, and they refer to each other as brothers. And in my story, I mean, and so I think that there's a lot of I spent a lot of time talking about the feelings that these kids are struggling with at being abandoned and being left, and wondering what their lives would have been like if they had parents in a home and all that kind of stuff. So I guess in that sense, I do consider what it would be like to be an orphan even today.
When you started doing your research, what was one of the things that surprised even you that you didn't know about the time period and the situation that you were writing your story in?
I'll say that I had to do some research about outhouses, and I learned some interesting. I won't go into detail, but I learned some interesting things about how that whole situation worked. It involves corn cobs and things like that. But as it pertains to how one would clean themselves, there was a lot of things that were interesting, about the period. I think it was all very sad. I read a lot about, like I said earlier, how orphans were sold to factories and the death rate. Like in my novel, in the first chapter, the main character kind of very matter-of-factly is thinking about the fact that winter is coming, and he kind of just wonders, how many of the kids will survive, and in a way that's just very matter-of-fact. And I think that's kind of the realities of that time period. Was it was such a harsh conditions. And, with medicine and modern conveniences like electricity and heat and all those kind of things. And I think just a lot of kids didn't survive the harsh environment that they were in. So that was kind of one of the things that I took away from my research.
Well, the book is called Boys in the Valley. And Philip, congratulations on yet another successful novel that has come out in less than a year. And thank you once again for taking the time to be on the program with us.
Of course, Peter. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Philip Fracassi, author of the horror novel Boys in the Valley. You can go to my website at thestuffile.com, check out the show number for this program, which is show number 0739, and you'll find links to Philip's site, plus links to either Amazon.com or Amazon.ca, where you can order his book directly. You're listening to the Stuph File Program with me, Peter Anthony Holder.
Got something for the mailbag? Drop Peter a line. He'd love to hear from you. Send your email to mailbag@thestufffile.com. And remember, stuff is spelled S-T-U-P-H. That's mailbag@thestufffile.com. Or catch up with him on Twitter or Facebook. There's more Stuph File coming your way in just a few moments.
Michael Liebling is the author of The Serial Killer's Son Takes a Wife. It's a page-turning thriller. You say you've read other serial killer novels? Oh, as Michael will tell you, not like this one.
It's not like any serial killer novel you've read before. It really goes behind the scenes. So when I say he takes a wife, you've got to imagine what it's like to be the offspring of somebody who's murdered multiple people. So how do you live with yourself after that? And you were just a kid when it all happened. If you fall in love, how do you tell the woman you love your dad was a serial killer? And how would she react? So the title, it's not entirely clear, but as you get into it, it will become very clear.
The Serial Killer's Son Takes a Wife. It's a recipe for mystery with a scoop of humor and a sprinkle of horror. The Serial Killer's Son Takes a Wife. Available now at Amazon and wherever you buy books.
You're listening to the Stuph File Program with Peter Anthony Holder, a show that is sanitized for your protection.
And still to come in the program, we'll talk to Marc Hartzman from WeirdHistorian.com. His new book is called We Are Not Alone, The Extraordinary History of UFOs and Aliens, Invading Our Hopes, Fears, and Fantasies. We also have an Idiot of the Day coming your way a little later on, and a few more Stuph File news stories right here, right now. Accident investigators say 34-year-old Jesus Carino Ortiz didn't slow down when pulling up to a business in Santa Rosa, California. He smashed right into the building, a grocery store. He got out to go shopping at the store. Grocery stores in California can and do sell liquor, and that's what Carino Ortiz was shopping for. They didn't let him buy any booze. He had suffered significant injuries in the crash. Well, that and police found his blood alcohol level was already 0.32%, 4 times the legal limit. Carino Ortiz was hospitalized and arrested, charged with DUI and driving with a suspended license, because in these stories they always have a suspended license. Clearly, he seems to have a history of not slowing down with anything. Airport security at Panama City's International Airport searched a Copa airline flight bound for Tampa, Florida, for a suspected bomb, only to find an adult diaper. The plane had returned to the Panama City airport following reports of a possible bomb. The Boeing 737-800 landed around 11 a.m. local time and moved to an isolated stretch of the tarmac where 144 passengers were taken off the plane. An anti-explosives team inspected the aircraft. Jose Castro, the head of the airport's security team, said a suspicious object in one of the plane's bathrooms was found to be an adult diaper. So, they had a jet on a secure runway where police, special explosives K-9 units, and special forces examined the object, and all they found was an adult diaper. Wow. Everybody involved had a crappy day. Anyway, let's get to our last guest here on this edition of the Stuph File Program, shall we? Marc Hartzman, the curator of WeirdHistorian.com, is back, but not with a story for the month of October. Instead, he's here to talk about his latest book. This one is called We Are Not Alone, The Extraordinary History of UFOs and Aliens Invading Our Hopes, Fears, and Fantasies. Marc joins us via Skype from New York. Hi, Marc.
Hi, Peter. How are you?
Just tickety-boo. You must be excited like a schoolgirl, because I know you've been working on this book for a while, but good Lord, the fact that you come out with this book just after congressional hearings and the story about aliens being found in Mexico, it's like you couldn't have gotten better press this summer than you have just received.
Yeah, the timing has been terrific. So hopefully there's a lot of good interest in the topic right now.
So how long have you been working on this book?
I started this book, I would say, late summer of 2021, somewhere around there. So it's been a lot of research, a lot of fun research. Interviewed a ton of people, a range of people, from people within the government to experiencers, people who claim to have been abducted, historians, ufologists, just really a good range. Scientists as well, people from NASA. So it covers quite a bit. And so that involved, obviously, lots of phone calls, lots of meetings, lots of travel, but all of it just a real joy to put together.
Okay, so I have to ask right off the bat, what is your level of belief in the topic of We Are Not Alone? And has it changed one way or the other based on just the research you did in writing this book?
So it's a good question. First of all, I'll just say I write the book not with a particular agenda. So I'm not trying to convince you that, yes, they're all aliens are all here, or no, they're not here. Of course, the book is called We Are Not Alone, which implies certainly something is going on. But I don't try to sway you one way or the other as much as just present evidence to you and let the reader decide really based on the evidence I'm providing, the stories I'm providing, what they want to walk away with, which at the end of the day, I hope is really an open mind about the subject, which is what I have. I find myself to be very open-minded about it. There are stories that I find very convincing that something is going on. I can give you a couple examples.
Yes.
One of them, for example, is a friend of mine who was really helpful with the book. He's been researching a topic since the 70s. His name was Lee Spiegel. Sadly, he just passed away in August, which is really tragic. But he was a huge help, and he had an experience in 1975 in North Carolina. He saw this triangular UFO. He was sent there by J. Allen Hynek, who was running CUFOS at the time, the Center for UFO Studies. And he was with a police officer. They were tracing the different calls and reports of this particular UFO. And they actually ended up seeing it. And it was about treetop level. So it wasn't really high up in the sky. It was fairly low. Obvious that they were seeing something physical lit up. And it was completely silent. Like I said, triangular in shape. It actually shot a beam of light down at Lee's feet. And then it took off. And there were other witnesses there as well who all saw this thing. They followed it for a while in the police car. Eventually lost track of it. And they could not find any explanation. He checked with the Air Force, checked in terms of testing. Is there equipment happening? Pilots testing, different kinds of flight apparatus, but nothing lined up with what they saw, and no one ever found a suitable explanation for what they saw. So this was coming from someone who I know, versus, you hear lots of stories which are hearsay, but knowing that I know who this is and I don't see any reason that he would make things up or just be wildly imaginative, it's a compelling story to me. Also hearing from people like Lou Elizondo and Christopher Mellon, who've talked about, these are the two of the guys who broke that story for the New York Times in 2017 that really revealed all the different secret programs going on within the Pentagon. So Lou was running that program in the Pentagon. Christopher Mellon worked with the Intelligence Department, who helped organize the release of this material and helped really spearhead the effort to make this known, really as a matter of national defense, basically saying, hey, we have Navy pilots who are seeing things in their F-16 Hornet fighters, and they don't know what they are. And they've been tracked on radar. They see it with their eyes, and we can't identify what these things are. So those videos have been out all over the media. I'm sure people have seen those. And I find that also really compelling that we really don't have suitable answers for what these pilots are seeing. And these are people who are trusted to fly these, billion-dollar aircraft. I don't think that they would make stuff up. They seem very honest. They see these things a lot. It wasn't just, there's 3 videos that were released. It wasn't just 3 occasions these things were seen. They've seen quite a lot. And Lou and Chris both said, like, there's more video. Like Lou would say, he's seen a lot more stuff, which, he could not reveal what those things were. But apparently there's more video that exists that hasn't been made public yet. So you hear things like that, and it really makes you wonder. It kind of does sway you to think that, something is happening. Is it something from another world? Is it something from within our own world that we haven't discovered yet? We don't know. But that's kind of the fun, is that there's still this mystery, which is out there. But amazingly, the government acknowledges that something is in the U.S. airspace, which it doesn't know what it is. That's a pretty big acknowledgement.
How do you feel about the so-called cases of alien abduction?
So these are, I talk about several cases in the book. And, these are hard cases to understand. What's going on? Did something really happen? Were they truly abducted? Is there something going on in the brain that changes different experiences to make you think that this was happening? I don't know. I don't want to say one way or the other, because who am I to say? I didn't have the experience personally. But there are interesting cases. The most famous of them being the Betty and Barney Hill case from 1961.
Yes.
They went through all the different hypnosis sessions and met with a famous hypnotist and psychologist to go through all that. There's different theories about it. Some of it seems rather interesting, what they described. Some of it also seems like, could there have been other forces at work? Again, we don't know. That could be like just different things within the brain, suggesting that something happened. But again, they held firm to their beliefs that something happened. I know other people who've said the same thing. They firmly believe what happened, and they have no reason to lie about it. So I don't know. I mean, I think that the idea of aliens reaching Earth, it would be remarkable, right? I mean, obviously it would be extraordinary just to cover that distance. We're talking, a lot of these places, we're talking, other star systems might be thousands of light years away. And, 1 light year is 6 trillion miles. It's hard to fathom covering that distance. And also the timeline of existences lining up, civilizations lining up to get here while we're still here or while they were still alive. So there's a lot of factors that go into it. And I get into in the science section of the book, how the different factors that would go into another being being able to even just exist within our own galaxy.
But again, we are using our limited technology and belief system to understand what might be an advanced civilization, and therefore, what they can do might be in the blink of an eye, as opposed to what we can do.
Yes. Well, that's the other side of the argument, is that, hey, look, if you just look at what we've done the past 100 years technologically, it's like unbelievable, right? Like if you were alive 100 years ago and you told someone we were doing what you and I are doing right now, that would sound impossible. So who's to say that a civilization that could be 500 years ahead of us, 1,000 years ahead of us, or much more, exactly, maybe they could get here in a blink of an eye in ways we could never imagine at this stage. So that's certainly quite possible. And if that's possible, then yes, why couldn't abduction be possible? So again, these are all the different things I get into. Again, I'm not trying to say this definitely happened and here's why, or this definitely didn't happen and here's why. But it is presenting the possibilities and the stories. And the stories are certainly what these people believed, and that part is definitely true, that they believe these things happen to them. And there's some pretty amazing stories in there. And again, all of it becomes rather compelling.
Well, again, I will ask the second part of my question that I asked in the first part of our discussion, and that is, after having written this book, are you more or less of a believer?
I would say I'm more of a believer. I think there's got to be something out there, right? It's a question of, what we just talked about. Can it get here? Is it already here? Has it been here? Again, there's a lot of interesting possibilities, but I think there's no question that something interesting is happening. People are seeing things, people are experiencing things, and it's just a matter of trying to understand what that is and how soon we will. And, and if there's more to learn from the government, of course, there's lots of talk about disclosure. Is it slowly happening? It might be. It's kind of exciting to see if we might learn something in the near future, whether it's through government disclosure or through other scientific pursuits. Avi Loeb, I wrote about, he's got the Galileo project going on, which is collecting its own data with a team of more than 100 scientists to study data, to look at the skies. He's got the equipment, he's got the reputation, the know-how to potentially find some actual information to help us understand what might be out there. So I think there's a lot of excitement in the near future of what we might finally learn.
I think your title says it all, and that is, I've always believed, whether I believe or not about UFOs or the sightings of UFOs, I can definitely agree on the fact that we are not alone. In this entire universe, in the entire cosmos, I can't imagine that we are alone.
Yeah, I mean, as Carl Sagan said, it would really be a huge waste of space, wouldn't it? I mean, the universe is it's hard to fathom how massive it is. I mean, you hear about how many, hundreds of billions of stars in our galaxy alone, and then how many billions of galaxies are there? And the number of exoplanets they're discovering keeps going up every year. I think when I wrote the book, they had found, roughly 5,000 exoplanets. I'm sure it's more by now. And so some of those, I think there was just news a few weeks ago that NASA was finding that one of them looked like had the potential to host life. Whether or not that life would grow into an intelligent life, able to contact other civilizations, no idea. But you start to see these possibilities out there where planets might be in a Goldilocks zone from its star to actually harbor some life. And we may learn that soon from the James Webb Telescope, and within a few decades, another telescope will be launched from NASA as well that will give us even more information.
Again, the book is We Are Not Alone, The Extraordinary History of UFOs and Aliens Invading Our Hopes, Fears, and Fantasies. Mark, congratulations on the book, and thank you very much for being on the program with us.
Yeah, thanks so much, Peter. I appreciate it.
And we'll speak to you next month about November.
Sounds good.
Marc Hartzman, the curator of WeirdHistorian.com. He's also the author of several books, his most recent one being We Are Not Alone, The Extraordinary History of UFOs and Aliens Invading Our Hopes, Fears, and Fantasies. You can go to my website at thestuffile.com, check out the show number for this program, which is show number 0739, and you'll find the link to Mark's site, plus links to either Amazon.com or Amazon.ca, where you can order his book directly. You're listening to the Stuff File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder. We do have an Idiot of the Day coming your way, but I've got one more Stuff File news story to share with you right here. A police officer in the Wiltshire, England Road Policing Unit clocked a driving experience group on the A303 highway consisting of a pack of 5 count 'em, 5 McLaren 720S supercars speeding at more than 160 kilometers per hour. The copper, who was driving a BMW, managed to get them all to pull over to receive citations and said the cars were too close together and also passed other cars too closely. 720S, by the way, costs more than £1 million. That's about $1.2 million US. So how did the officer manage to get all 5 cars to pull over? Well, according to Wiltshire Police, they can only go a few miles before they have to pull over and take pictures of their cars. Wow, that's a vain bunch, isn't it? Yeah. Coming up next for this driving experience, the richly deserved courtroom experience. And now, boys and girls, it's that moment you've all been waiting for. It's time now for the Idiot of the Day.
And now it's time for the strange things adults do. The Stuff File presents the Idiot of the Day.
A Florida man who'd been convicted of felonies 29 times has made it 30 after he shot down a drone that a sheriff's office was using at a crime scene. 52-year-old Wendell Doyle Goney pleaded guilty to possession of a firearm as a convicted felon. He now faces 10 years in federal prison. The feds said Lake County Sheriff's deputies responding to a burglary at a 10-acre property were using a drone to help search until it was destroyed by gunfire from a neighboring property. The deputies went next door, found Goney, and said he admitted that he had just shot down the drone with a .22 caliber rifle. Goney claimed that the drone had been harassing him. Goney then admitted to the deputies that he could not lawfully possess a firearm because he was a convicted felon. Authorities checked the records and indeed found 29 prior Florida felony convictions. They included crimes such as aggravated assault on a law enforcement officer, resisting arrest with violence, drug possession, burglary, and possession of a firearm by a convicted felon. Goney is also prohibited from possessing firearms and ammunition under federal law. Now, why? Oh, why? If you're a 29-time convicted felon and you've already been convicted for illegally possessing a firearm as a convicted felon, would you shoot down a police drone with a rifle? One reason, and one reason only. You're an idiot!
Gee, I'm only a kid, but even I know you're an idiot.
And that's it for this edition of the Stuff File program, number 0739. Hope you enjoyed it. The website is thestufffile.com, and once again, stuff is spelled S-T-U-P-H, where you'll find information and links on all of our guests by going to the weekly Stuff File page. Just look for the corresponding program number, and once again, that's 0739. Email me at peter@thestufffile.com. You can also find me on Facebook, X, Spoutible, Post, and Blue Sky as PA Holder. Check us out on patreon.com, where you can become a patron of the program. Hope to see you back here for our next show on the air, online, or as a download. We're coming to you from everywhere, including KDXRadio.com, TrueTalkRadio.com, over the air on World FM in New Zealand, WLSLLP FM in Dade City, Florida, KZZHLP FM in Eureka, California, CKUW FM in Winnipeg, CFMU in Hamilton, CKLU in Sudbury, Local 107.3 FM in St. John, CHSR in Fredericton, and also streaming on just about any streaming service your little heart desires. That's it. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to the Stuph File Program with Peter Anthony Holder, a presentation of Flying Fish Communications. Always remember this very timely piece of advice. Good news is just life's way of keeping you off balance.